Evel Knievel inspired millions of us with his courage and perseverance. We're building a museum so you can relive those memories and be reinvigorated with that spirit of bravery.
My name is Evel Knievel. I'm a professional daredevil.
Along the way, we meet people involved in the life, the times, and the legacy of the King of Daredevils. Here with their stories is your host, Joe Friday.
Hey, greetings, my friend from fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. We are still here celebrating a Super Bowl victory by the Kansas City Chiefs. I wanted to thank our last guest, the man behind the mascot, Dan Mears. He has a harrowing story about an injury that happened to him and his recovery and his perseverance and courage. So if you need a little inspiration, just rewind and go find that show. But today, Jeff Walker, who we ran into while we were in Las Vegas, agreed to meet with us. Jeff's got a podcast that talks about where to stay, where to eat, what shows to see while you're in Las Vegas. He interviews celebrities, so you get an idea of what you might like or what you might not like, and you can make reservations. If you're like me, you want to come in with a plan into Las Vegas. You're not going to just show up with your suitcase. Okay, I'm here. It's a very worthwhile podcast. It's Jeff Does Vegas at jeffdoesvegas.com or, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Anyway, Jeff agreed to meet with us today, not about restaurants, casinos, and hotels, except to say that it is about Caesar's Palace specifically and the fountains that Evel Knievel jumped. So let's go talk a little bit about Las Vegas history with Jeff Walker. Come on.
Yeah.
I've been looking for a podcast mentor, and you had the best Las Vegas podcast that I found. Ironically, you're not from Vegas.
No, which is really weird. Everybody always gets a little thrown off by that, but I feel like a local. There's times I get annoyed by the tourists and I hand out directions to people. So I kind of start feeling a little bit like a local. So it's good. Yeah, I mean, it's great to, as I say, finally sit down and meet. I've been called a lot of things. I've never been called a mentor. So I appreciate that.
You've helped me immensely so far.
Let's start off. I want to find out a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the Evel Knievel Museum. What was your connection with Evel Knievel?
I have a business in Topeka, Kansas, where we do a lot of stainless steel specialties, especially in the food business, center of agriculture there in Kansas. So we have a lot of food processing. My specialty was stainless steel, and a guy comes in and says, "Can you polish this bumper for me?" And I said, "I can, but I won't because it's not what I do. I don't do automotive because you got to deal with, you're not just working on somebody's tractor. You have to get the whole story. They pull their phone out and start telling you all about it." It ended up being, he's really trying to twist my arm. "This is Evel Knievel's bumper." And I say, did Evel Knievel have money? I didn't know Evel Knievel was dead at the time. But it turns out that it was Historic Harley-Davidson of Topeka that needed this restoration work done, because they were working on this semi-truck that Evel Knievel had. It's like a circus wagon. If this big red wagon comes through your town, you know something big's going to happen. So we ended up helping them out, and 100 local contractors helped out. And so we restored this big red truck, and that's how I started to get involved.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned you didn't know Evel Knievel was dead. Were you not an Evel Knievel fan prior to this situation? I'm sure you were aware of who Evel Knievel was.
Yeah, I was a fan when I was a kid, but in 1977, Evel Knievel dropped off the map.
Right.
I just quit following him when they quit putting him on the front of the National Enquirer or whatever. So I hadn't heard that name since 1977.
Right.
I was a fan then, but moved on.
Obviously, now you're involved with the museum, so you know the Evel Knievel story intimately. Let's talk a little bit about the Evel Knievel story and share a little bit about his life and his history and where he started and what he ended up doing.
Okay, so he started in Butte, Montana, where he was born, and started all the shenanigans, the motorcycle riding and the hucksterism kind of deal, where he started a security business for $30 a month. He guarantees your tavern will not get broke into.
Yeah, one of those kinds of deals. Yeah, okay.
Like you don't pay the $30, well, there's no guarantee your tavern's not going to get broken.
I get it. Yeah.
Worked at the mines there, dropped out of high school there. He was a high school athlete, so he was a ski jumper in high school, award-winning, amateur hockey player, after the Army. In the Army, he was a pole vaulter. So that's where he got to start. Made his way around the country. His hero was Joey Chitwood from Topeka, Kansas, who was a race car driver. Mm-hmm. It was a hugely skilled race car driver. He could take his car up on two wheels, go around a track. Took his show on the road. He's got rodeo clowns and everything, and he's jumping over flaming barrels. And Evel Knievel goes and sees Joey Chitwood crash into a wall and says, "That's what I want to do the rest of my life." It's a long story, but his launch into stardom was here in Las Vegas.
Right. So I think people who are Vegas fanatics, or even with a little bit of knowledge about Vegas, have a bit of an idea of the Vegas connection with Evel Knievel. But it was 1969. Am I getting my numbers right? Oh, 67. So I was close.
Okay. It was,
so
you were really close.
I was really
New
close.
Year's Eve.
Yeah, New Year's Eve, 1967 into 68. And he decides, prior to that, obviously, he's going to jump his motorcycle over the fountains of Caesar's Palace.
Yeah. He's unemployed at that point. He tried to have a Joey Chitwood circus where he had a little guy come and entertain crowds. If Evel was going to jump over two trucks, then Butch Wilhelm would get on his little mini bike and jump over two Tonka trucks. If Evel's going through flaming boards, Butch is going through cardboard.
Yeah.
And I mean, as an aside, Butch eventually became an Ewok, and he lived in Hollywood.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But he's unemployed. He's sitting at a bar in Butte, Montana, when one of his buddies says, "Hey, you know, our fellow beautician, I guess they would call it, our fellow beautician is fighting against Dick Tiger. His name's Rick Rouse from Butte, Montana. Is going to fight against Dick Tiger in a boxing match, and it's in Vegas. Let's road trip it." So they pile from the bar into a van to Vegas, where they cannot afford a room at this palatial venue. Jay Sarno has built this $25 million hotel.
Yeah.
Called it Caesar's Palace. It's got the Roman columns. The hostesses dressed like goddesses. They cannot afford to stay there, but they can afford a beer there. Mm-hmm. They go into the bar, and one of his buddies, this guy says, his buddy's got great ideas. You know, you could be the draw here. They don't have a Dean Martin like the Sands has. They don't have a Frank Sinatra like the Dunes has. You could do like your wheelies and tricks that you do at home here as a draw. Evel said, the more beer I drank, the smaller these fountains got, until I decided I'm going to jump these fountains. I'm going to call the owner of this joint.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he did. He called the owner. Could not get past the receptionist, even though he explains, "I'm famous. I was on Wide World of Sports for 3 minutes last year." Jay Sarnos is not going to take the call because he tells the receptionist, "No more calls from that yahoo." So Evel begins to just disguise his voice.
I love it.
"Hey, it's Bill Fleming from ABC's Wide World of Sports. I'm calling about this Evel Knievel character that's supposed to jump your fountains on New Year's Eve, making sure you have enough rooms for me and my entire crew." Sarno says, "Never heard of it." Then, "Hey, it's Sammy Smith, my boss here at Sports Illustrated, told me to come take pictures of this character, Evel Knievel, jumping over your fountains on New Year's Eve. What time does that start?" And then finally, Evel calls with a lawyer accent. "Hello, it's Saul Rosenberg. I understand that you're promoting an event in which my client, Evel Knievel, is to jump your fountains. The only problem is we don't have any sort of contract or agreement for him to come perform at your place. I'm inclined to sue you, as it happens I'm going out of town with another of my clients. You may have heard of Lawrence Welk. But Evel Knievel is in Las Vegas and available to meet with you tomorrow." So by then, Sarno is going...
I love it.
Yeah, Sarno goes from "never heard of it" to "call me back" to "where you been, kid? I've been looking all over for you."
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the beginning. That's the beginning of the Caesar's Palace story. Mm-hmm. Later, Evel fessed up to it, and he and Jay Sarno became close friends.
Yeah.
But at the time, that's how he got the gig for very little money, like $1,000 on New Year's Eve and $1,000 on New Year's Day. Mm-hmm. He and then Sarno said, I'm not covering your hospital bills either." So Knievel wrecks. Just spoiler. I guess it's not a spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert! It happened.
Spoiler alert, 1968.
1968. But spoiler alert in case you've been living under a rock since then. Yeah. It did not go well for him on this jump by any stretch of the imagination. Went very badly.
Went very badly.
Very badly.
Yeah. He hit the top of a van, the very last van, cleared most of the fountains. I mean, he did clear the fountains, but as he said, I never had a problem jumping a motorcycle. It was always the landing.
Right.
Right. Broke both wrists, both ankles, his hip, his pelvis, and femur.
Yeah.
And was rushed to the hospital. Meanwhile, Sarno, the owner of the hotel, is watching from the porte-cochere. It's a great vantage point, but he's got these two little kids with him, his kids, his two sons. And they both thought they saw a man die.
Right.
And Sarno says, no, Mr. Knievel was alive. I could see him speaking as they loaded him into the ambulance. But to reassure you, I will take you to the hospital and show you that Mr. Knievel's okay.
Yeah.
It takes him 20 minutes to get from his office to his car, which normally takes two minutes.
Right.
But it's so crowded. And Sarno starts scratching his head thinking, wow, this place is so packed. It's taking me this long. And I've still got this clown signed for a second jump.
Right.
It may not be tomorrow, but he's contractually obligated to go and do it. They get to the hospital. Knievel is awake, alive, and alert, flirting with nurses, but in a lot of pain.
Right.
And he says, Jay, thank God you're here. You got to get me out of here. I don't have insurance.
Of course. Right. Of course.
And Jay Sarno, you've known Jay Sarno's story.
Yes. I mean, very, very famous, developing Caesar's Palace and Circus, and heavily involved in the development of Las Vegas in the somewhat modern resort area. He would have been, I mean, to compare him, he almost would have been the Steve Wynn of that era of Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Like from Frontier Town to Mega Resort. Almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyways, the point is that he's a super mind when it comes to marketing. Mm-hmm. And he says, don't worry, kid, I will cover your hospital bills if you roll with me on this marketing plan, because you're coming to jump again as soon as you get out. But you got to heal up first. So I'm going to pay off the nurses to speak to nobody. I'm going to pay off the doctors to hold a press conference in their white lab coats, which they do. And the doctor stands out front and says, yes, Evel Knievel is alive in our hospital, and we are assured that he is going to try again as soon as he awakes from his coma.
Just the ultimate level of P.T. Barnum-ish showmanship, right? Yeah. Like, really.
He is. Both those two characters.
Yeah.
I don't know how this town survived both of them on the town at the same time.
That's outstanding.
Yeah. So he never did end up doing the second jump, but that is what launched his career, that press conference, because it not only ran in Butte and Las Vegas, but it ran in Kansas City and New York and Dallas and Chicago. This crazy maniac crashed and almost killed himself, and he's fixing to do it again.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, he went on after that. Like you say, that was the jump that really launched his career, because he went on from there, and he did further jumps and bigger paychecks. And of course, then came endorsements. And all of a sudden, this is a guy who is on lunchboxes, and he's action figures, and it's millions of dollars in endorsements that he's getting as well.
Yeah, that was the cash cow was this toy. I'm not sure if you're old enough yet, but if you're old enough, but there was a toy when I was a kid that outsold Barbie in 1974. It's the first action figure made after a living, breathing human being, and that's the Evel Knievel stunt cycle.
Right.
Wind it up, it's got a little gyro in it, and it takes off, and it really works. It was one of those toys that actually worked as advertised.
Yeah.
And he made more money off of that toy than he did any events or television or movies or jumps.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen videos recently, because there's the odd time somebody will score one of these things off of eBay or in an antique store that still works, and you see the video of them, and they're just winding it up, and you watch it. And yeah, like, it actually does work really well, the way it should work, as opposed to so many of those other toys that, yeah, they didn't work like that. This really, you could set it up to jump over stuff, is fantastic.
So fun. Yeah.
Awesome.
And all started here in that hospital bed.
Yeah.
He had called Wide World of Sports, which eventually turned into ESPN, but Wide World of Sports was on one day a week and said, I'm jumping over the fountains at Caesar's Palace, come cover me. They declined. We've already got a schedule, but maybe if you take some footage, we might use it if you send it to us.
Right.
So he hired private contractors, John Derrick, who's more famous for marrying Bo Derek, and his wife at the time was Linda Evans, who's famous for Dynasty.
I think Dynasty, yeah.
And they took the footage, I mean, this amazing footage, which is kind of like the agony of defeat now,
Yeah.
but at the time, had it developed, dropped it off to be developed in Los Angeles, where they lived, went camping for a week, because that's how long it took to develop the film, and returned. The developer hands him this canister and says, I have done Oscar work, and this is the best footage I have ever seen in my entire life. And they rushed it to Las Vegas, screened it on Evel Knievel's hospital room wall there, and it's Evel Knievel head over tea kettle, just looks exactly like a rag doll, and his bones are breaking, and you can see it. And even though it's black and white, and even though it's old footage, it still makes one cringe to look at. And of course, when he saw it for the first time, his eyeballs turned into little dollar signs, and he said,
Right.
Man, I'm going to take that on Joey Bishop and Johnny Carson. And if people don't want to come watch me make a jump successfully at their state fair, they sure don't want to miss it when I die there. Right?
It was almost like him failing that jump really kind of was the best thing that ever happened to him.
So true.
Right?
So true. So true.
And the fact that, I mean, what still blows me away to this day is the fact that, yeah, he pitches it to Wide World of Sports and they're like, no, you know what? Get back to us if something exciting happens. Something exciting really happened,
It
right?
did.
That's so cool. And I mean, so to this day now, there's been a lot of, and well, I mean, to follow up on that, as you say, he never tried the jump again. He never attempted the Caesar's Palace jump again. Was that a choice? Was it his choice? Do you know if it was a choice by Caesars, or was it just he never got around to it, or Caesars wasn't willing to let him nearly die again? Like, how come that never happened?
Yeah, I think that was probably Evel Knievel that did not hold up his end of the bargain on that contract. The reason I say that is because you did a special on Caesar's Palace and stunts there.
Yeah.
And they did let other people do it. They let Robbie Knievel do it, and they let Travis Pastrana do it.
Yeah.
And Gary
Wells tried it too. He also spectacularly failed as well. So yeah, it didn't go well for a lot of people.
That's true. Yeah.
But Robbie succeeded. Robbie did it.
Yes.
He did the jump.
Yep. He
And
succeeded.
Travis Pastrana, he made it.
Yeah, dude. He broke all the records.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was clearly doable, but with Evel, if I'm recalling correctly, was it Evel Knievel that he figured there was a bit of a downshift right as he was hitting the ramp, or a bit of a drop in speed? Was that Evel? That was what he figured why he didn't make it?
That's what Evel said, yeah.
The Evel Knievel connection to Vegas continues today. I mean, there's a fair bit of history, particularly, I'm assuming you've been down to Evil Pie on Fremont Street.
Yes, Evil Pie.
Which, of course, is run by the estate of Evel Knievel. And if you've never been there, it's such a cool little joint, just jammed with Evel Knievel memorabilia. It's a fantastic place to go.
Yeah.
The first time you ever went in there, was it just kind of like, this is awesome?
Yeah, that's the first time I was in there. I was like, this is awesome. This is awesome. By then, I had already worked at the Evel Knievel Museum in Topeka. So, I mean, it was less awesome than the museum in Topeka, but they had some stuff.
But do they serve pizza at the museum in Topeka?
No.
There you go. That's what wins it.
Well, Jeff, you haven't been there, but the barbecue at the museum.
There we go.
Really good.
There we go. Let's talk about the museum. So right now it is in Topeka, Kansas, which seems kind of random in my brain. I'm assuming there's a reason it's in Topeka.
I hear you.
Yeah.
It is sort of random, but that's where we're from. And that's where Mike Patterson's from. And he befriended a really great guy, Latham McKay, who was the collector of Evel Knievel paraphernalia. If it was Evel Knievel, he was and is on a mission to get it. Starting with a pair of leathers, and then Latham looked around see where the Evel Knievel Museum was, and there wasn't one. So Lathan, I get the two confused, just went out and collected a lot of different things, motorcycles and helmets and jewelry, canes, capes, and had a traveling exhibit for a while.
Okay.
Eventually ran across this big red circus wagon that I was telling you about.
Right.
And it was rotting away in a lot in Florida. And Lathan didn't really know where to get it restored. He had tried a place or two that just couldn't get started. And Jeff, I mean, it was dilapidated. You could see sky through the cab of the Mack truck. And it was friends with the Jerry Lee Lewis family from Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay. Yeah.
And historic Harley Davidson of Topeka. They specialize in the historic restoration of Harley Davidson.
Right.
So if it says Harley Davidson, whether it's 1906 or whether it's 1940, whatever it is, Mike's going to make sure that gets restored to as pristine as you can pay for. So that's how it started. Lathan called Mike and said, "Hey, I've got this Mack truck that was owned by Evel Knievel. Can you restore it?"
Yeah.
But what Mike hears is blah, 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 Evel Knievel, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Mike's like, yeah, bring it.
Yeah.
So this motorcycle now is in the business of restoring a big tractor trailer with a coach and it's a Mack. It's a 1974 Mack truck, I think.
Yeah.
So it took a couple years, and it took 100 local contractors. As I said, I was one of them, but Goodyear Tire was another one, and it's all painted like a motorcycle. So all the old logos are replicated in hand-painted design instead of logos.
That's awesome.
Anyway, far, far too big for the traveling museum.
Right.
And so built a 13,000 square foot museum there so that people could enjoy Lathan and Mike's collections.
That's awesome. And so now the plan is, this is very cool, and this is how you and I connected and talking about Las Vegas and Evel Knievel. The plan is the museum is coming to Vegas.
Hot damn.
Hot damn. That is so cool. So let's talk a little bit about that. You guys have a location in mind. You have a timeline in mind of when people are going to be able to start visiting the Evel Knievel Museum in Las Vegas.
Yes to the first part and no to the second.
Okay.
So, yes, there's a place, and it's in the Arts District, which is between the Strip and downtown.
Right.
In Fremont. The Arts District is an up-and-coming spot. Everybody I've talked to here in Las Vegas this week is super excited about the Arts District. I have not been there yet.
Yeah.
But they've got First Fridays, and it looks hugely crowded.
It's a real booming area in the city. And as you say, it's with lots of great restaurants and lots of great new real estate and lots of great new apartments and condos and living space. And it is the hot spot for people to be going to in Las Vegas right now. That is where everybody is starting to go, is into the Arts District. So that's an outstanding spot.
Good. I didn't pick it. The team picked it. But yeah, it sounds great. And they've got a new punk rock museum going in there just down the street. Yeah. And I don't know what other, but there are other museums there. The Burlesque Museum.
Yeah, the Burlesque Hall of Fame is down in there. I've had them on the podcast. I've yet to go through, but I've had them on the podcast to talk about the history of burlesque in Las Vegas and the Burlesque Hall of Fame. And yeah, like it's a real growing area. And that location, being near Fremont and being downtown, but also being sort of within easy access of the Strip, that's a great spot. That's a really good spot for that to be. That's going to be excellent.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, Topeka's been really kind to us.
Yeah.
But Vegas, I mean, come on. That's where it belongs.
Yeah.
Nobody could argue that it should be in Topeka, Kansas.
Right.
Instead of Las Vegas.
And so now something that you've branched out into, and that's why you're here in Vegas this week at this conference. Everybody comes to Vegas to go to a conference. You're here, Podcast Movement Evolutions, learning how to get into the podcast space. And that's how you reached out to me to connect, to talk about podcasting. You are launching an Evel Knievel podcast, which I think is super cool. What made you want to jump into the podcast space with this?
Well, we've been talking a lot about marketing with to coincide with the opening of the Evel Knievel Museum here in Las Vegas. And podcasting is one of those things that I hadn't thought about in the last decade. But what I had thought about is I want to share these stories. people come in there, and a lot of people have a story about Evel Knievel, and a lot of them are getting up in years. Our mission is to preserve and present the legacy of Evel Knievel. So I wanted to get the stories of, say, the driver for Evel Knievel, of this big red truck, because he's got great stories, whether he's telling them or not.
Yeah.
But I was walking around at this conference.
We do, for those listening to this episode of the podcast, we're doing the air quotes around conference. The meme, I'm going to Vegas for a conference. Yeah. Here we are.
But you and I went out to watch bands play. Monday,
it was a Monday start. Yeah,
which was freaking awesome. It's mostly sitting in a dark room, listening to loud music, and probably about, 15 minutes of socializing.
Yeah.
And I met John Katz.
Yeah.
Or you introduced me to John Katz, who said, my uncle was the owner of Biceres Erie Cranes. And I'd heard that name. I'd seen the name on the cranes that did the Sky Cycle. But this is an example of one connection. Mm-hmm. Then I'm at the bar, and this girl sees my jacket and says, Evel Knievel, my dad did all his jewelry for Evel Knievel and all Sammy Davis Jr.'s and all Frank Sinatra's. And he did the TCB for Elvis, and his name is Mordecai. So I'm texting Mike from the museum saying, dude, we're getting gold for this podcast if I can get these people to come on.
Yeah.
And he says, how are you making all these connections, right? I said, just wear the jacket.
Yeah.
Just wear the jacket. People come up and they've got stories.
Yeah.
So I've got some in the bank for editing still.
Sure.
The biographer of Jay Sarno was on.
Was that David Schwartz?
David D. Schwartz.
Yeah. I've had Dave on a couple of times to talk. He wrote a book about the sands and the history of the sands. And so I had him on to talk about that. And then he also joined me to talk about family-friendly Vegas, because he wrote a bunch of stuff. He was involved in some panel discussions, I think they were hosted at the Mob Museum, about the family-friendly era of Las Vegas. And then he also, the great book, Grandissimo, which is all about Jay Sarno and all about the Caesar's Palace and Circus, and then the plans that he had for an even bigger resort, which was Grandissimo. So that's great that you were able to get David on to talk. That's great. Yeah.
Then we've got a couple others. Just as a preview of our podcast, Eddie Langert invented the metal golf driver. They were called woods before that. He used a 3-wood. But he invented it for weather purposes. He was a golf pro in Wisconsin. And it turns out these metal drivers could nail a golf ball a really long ways. Invested his life savings, mortgaged his house to build 16 prototypes, took them down to Florida, couldn't get any traction, couldn't get any buy-in. I mean, this sport's 500 years old. Nobody's buying metal woods clubs. And ends up on a golf course where Knievel tries to hustle him. And it's a long story. Knievel ends up buying into this metal golf club. This guy had traveled from Wisconsin with $22 and 16 clubs, ends up sells $2 million worth of clubs that weekend.
Jeez.
From $22 to $2 million with a little help from Evel Knievel.
Yeah.
George Sadlak was Evel Knievel's painter. He's going to be on. And, excuse me. And then hopefully we can get Lathan and Mike on. And it's been fun.
That's awesome.
Now I did a survey of what people wanted to hear on the Evel Knievel podcast, because this is my group, this is my target market, and even at this conference, they've been telling us, do what your listeners want. You don't need to worry about advertisers. Do what your listeners want, and everything else will flow from that. So I put out a survey or a poll on social media. If there was an Evel Knievel podcast, what would you want it covered? 50% wanted historic content or history content with the records and the jumps. 25% wanted insider news about displays that are being built or acquisitions. I hate to tell you this, Jeff. 0% wanted to hear travel tips, hotel information.
Well, I mean, they're not going to the Evel Knievel podcast for that. They're coming to my podcast for the travel tips and the travel information.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, I don't think my listeners know how often they come in and say, what's the closest restaurant? Or where can I get barbecue now that I'm here? Or where should I stay? So Jeff's the man. Jeff is the man. Jeff does Vegas. Jeff with a J sometimes.
No, just Jeff with a J. I like to say I'm a Jeff, not a G off. That's my tag. A timeline for the podcast launch? Are you thinking you want to have it, get the museum up and going and get the podcast out at the same time, or podcast leading up to the opening of the museum? Do you have any
leading up
thoughts?
To.
Yeah.
I've got some in the can. Got a few recorded. I've got most of those edited, not released yet. But I wanted to come to this conference first so I could, get tips and tricks on how to get those things uploaded and what the best ways to market that. Now that we're done with, I would guess I'm going to go home and see if I can get it launched.
That's awesome. It's funny how we joke about the conference, quote unquote, but it really is. It's interesting. You come to these things and you go home invigorated. And I mean, I know like after I finish this conference, I've got a couple of weeks off. I'm going to have about 5 interviews in the can and a trip report that I want to write. I'm going to go home and I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks just creating stuff. So it is when you spend the time around creative people and around people that are very encouraging to you, you do just want to go home and just want to create and you want to get at it. So that's excellent that you're looking at pushing this timeline forward and just going, yeah, I want to go home and I want to go hard and I want to get this stuff out there.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
In the meantime, if people want to learn about the Evel Knievel Museum and they want to hit Topeka, Kansas, how can they do that? You guys are online. You've got social media.
Both of those things, social media and online. So the online is evelknievelmuseum.com. That's the very best place to buy Evel Knievel gear. And the Evel Knievel gear I'm talking about is not cheap keychains, sorry, but it's expensive, well-made clothing and historic replicas of his canes and really good stuff. So there's that. But then online, there's Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think to coincide with the podcast will be video and audio. Just because that's what I'm used to. I've been doing 4-minute sessions on YouTube.
Which is excellent. That's a very cool way to do it. And especially, too, because you're going to be telling some really interesting stories from people who are going to be telling some interesting stories. And you want to get that facial expression and have that contact with them. So that's excellent. That's excellent.
Yeah. We've got a whole lot of historic video that sort of goes along with it.
Yeah.
It's awkward, and I'll have to walk through video on the podcast.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I wish you all the best with all of this. I think it's going to be excellent. I'm looking forward to the launch, and I'm looking forward to having something new to check out when I come to Vegas.
Yeah, right on.
Excellent.
Well,
excellent. Joe, thank you so much for this.
Happy landings. Thanks for joining us again. That was so nice of Jeff Walker to do that for us. We're going to head back to Kansas now. So if you're ready, we're going to take a trip back and we're going to play with some guns. We're going to play with explosive devices and we're going to race cars. Are you up for that? Well, then let's go.
All right. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. It's our mission to preserve and present the legacy of Evel Knievel. So if you have an idea for an episode or a guest, or have a suggestion to improve our show, just drop us a line at joe@thrill.show.
I just think the Evel Knievel way.
We leave you with the encouraging words from the book of Deuteronomy. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. Until next time, happy landings.
If you like to fly to the seat of your pants, this is where you belong.